morning, everyone. We are in Pinedale and Jackson this week, kicking off the class of 2025. And I'm here today with Emi Domoto-Reilly at her charming bed and breakfast, the Rivera Lodge. So Emi, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy morning to talk with us and for the delicious breakfast that you just cooked everyone here.
Well, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Emi is a woman who wears many hats, and since we're already here at the Rivera Lodge, I'd love to hear more about how this all came to be, how you acquired the Rivera Lodge, and how you got into the business of hospitality.
Yeah, absolutely. So I purchased this in 2007. So it's the 18th season of running the Rivera Lodge. So never thought I'd be here 18 years, but it's been 18. And prior to this, I had Lakeside Lodge, which is a restaurant on Fremont Lake, and it is a lease agreement. So I had that for 3 years. It was a challenging restaurant, is tough. And I thought this will be easier. This will keep me in food and it'll reconnect me with people. At the restaurant, I was back of the house and I never felt like I understood, did people enjoy their meal? Did they like their meal? Did they eat anything? And my staff would tell me, but I never had that direct contact. And this is very much direct contact, as Tobey just had breakfast with us, and it's a very interactive, and people are in my space and they're in both ways. So I wanted something that would get me back into that. And this happened to be on the market. My neighbor, who's the prior owner, who just wandered in and comes by frequently, her parents started this place and she had had it for 30 years and it was time to be done. And it was an opportunity. So.
And when did they start it?
Her parents started this place in 1952, and then they owned it for about 25 years, and then Barb sold it to her daughter, Barb, and then she ran it for 35, and then I came along. So 3 owners and 72 years of operation is kind of neat.
Yeah,
so.
That's amazing. Well, breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I think about breakfast when I go to sleep at night. I'm like, that's what gets me up in the morning. And I have high standards, and your breakfast is so good and homegrown, and it's just like, it's perfect for this place. And so for people who haven't been here, can you just tell a little bit about what it's like? Of course, we're on the river, maybe how many lodges there are, little cabins, and
sure,
kind of the nitty-gritty details. Oh, and there's a deer walking by.
We
just had a moose walk
at
by.
Breakfast.
A cow moose walk by during breakfast.
It happens all the time. So Pinedale's a small town. We don't even have a traffic light, but we're located right in the heart of town on Main Street and on Pine Creek. So it's a unique property where we have the busyness of 191, but then the quietness of the creek right behind us. There are 7 rooms. There's 5 rooms along the creek and 2 cabins. They're numbered 2 through 12, but there's no 3, 5, 7, or 8. I don't know how that happened, but I do know that once something started, you cannot change it because the guests know more than you do. And yeah, each one is unique and different. We cater to anyone traveling to Pinedale, whether they're here for a night, for a week, whether they're finishing a house and need a place to stay, or they're visiting family, or this has been their parents' place to come, or they just stumble upon us. So we see all kinds of tourists and travelers here, and it's really amazing the connections that we can make. So.
Cool. Yeah, whenever I stay here, it feels like I'm on a vacation, like at a little retreat. So, and then I could not believe this when I learned it. It's the first time I came here was a couple years ago for the class of 2023 retreat here in Pinedale. And I learned that you owned this. And then I learned that you also own Nested West, which is a store on Main Street. You bought an old home on Main Street and then turned it into a curated retail store with gifts and handmade items and all sorts of things. So can you tell us about where that idea came from and how that came to be? Because obviously you're already a busy woman and then you added another business. So how did that happen?
So yeah, the idea came out of probably ignorance and just the idea of, well, I'll try that. We had a small gift shop and still do as part of the Rivera. The upfront part here has a small section of retail. And a lot of our guests would ask, where can I get something? I want to bring something homemade back, or I'd like to find something that's uniquely Wyoming. And there are places in Pinedale, there's some wonderful shops that are here. And again, that just happened to be an opportunity. It was 2016 when I purchased the house on Main Street. And 16 was a pretty quiet time in Pinedale. It was a little between our booms and busts, and the house had just been sitting vacant for a few years. And it was built in 1919. It's a big, old, beautiful home with a slate foundation and the original windows. So it's got a lot of soul and character. I thought, well, maybe we'll try a little gift shop up there. So basically everything what we had here migrated up there. It started out pretty small. It was originally just the few front rooms, and then the back I made available for staff to live there. And then it grew. We realized that people really were interested, whether it's locals who are probably our biggest supporters. The holidays are the big time when people purchase gifts. And then it really expanded. So now it's about 7 rooms of the house. It goes all the way into the kitchen, and it represents people we found, mostly women-owned, companies that support women's co-ops, lots of handmade, as much based in Wyoming as we can. But basically trying to find things that are unique that you might not be able to find elsewhere. And that business is also based upon connections and relationships. I feel very close to a lot of the makers, and I appreciate what they do and how their journey to what their business is, whether it's a side business or something that they've made their full-on career. And it's been a great project. It's been really fun. I don't think I realized how busy I would be, because I started Nested West the year I did Leadership Wyoming. That started in 2019, since I was the class of 2020. But you don't know till you try. The worst thing that's going to happen is that it wasn't going to work. And I had the classes supported me very well. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's such a unique gift shop, I guess is kind of a funny way to describe it. But there are so many gift shops in places like Pinedale or Jackson that are, where people come to hike and tourists come. And there are so many of those gift shops that are just full of t-shirts and just things that don't have much meaning behind them. And so it's really special to have a store like that where there are things that you can buy for people, or things to bring back home after a trip, but that are made from people in this area or in the state of Wyoming or other places, but women-owned, that have a little bit of a deeper meaning.
And someday we may have some of your stuff.
I was just thinking that. Well, my next question, a lot of us know that Wyoming is a great place to start a business. I think I've always felt like business owners have way more opportunity here in Wyoming than any other place, for a lot of reasons. But having two businesses in a small remote community in the middle of Wyoming is definitely not without its struggles. So what are some of the challenges that you've faced being a business owner of 2 businesses that do rely somewhat on tourism?
Number one is always staff and employees, making sure you have enough. You never have enough, and as soon as you think you do, you need to hire one more. And that has been the struggle, even when I had Lakeside. So I ran that in 04, 05, 06. It has always been a struggle, and it will always continue to be. And it's not just having the bodies, it's having people that are engaged, educated, and interested in growing themselves personally, because that does help your business significantly, even if they're only there for a small amount of time. And the challenge that they see is the cost of living. So that's where employers really need to be able to provide some form of housing or subsidize that, or help them find locations to be. I think employees will always be the struggle. I don't see that changing. And we're always vying for the same ones. But people do work multiple jobs, and I think that is also very kind, in that people find that they enjoy the shop, so that they will try to work 1 shift a week, and they have a full-time job as a teacher or as a front desk at Game and Fish or something like that. But staffing will always be a big challenge, even if it is a very supportive environment in terms of access to funding, local people really wanting to support your business and looking for things that are different and unique. It's easy to get started. You can start a business today.
Yeah.
And you can.
Yeah. So staffing is obviously a big issue. I think a lot of businesses across the state and across the country feel that you can't compete with a remote job that's higher paying and has all those benefits. So for you, something like finding housing for the staff is a big way that has helped. Are there any other ways that you feel like can help small businesses with employers?
Flexibility. I mean, I think that's one thing I pride myself on, and I think my employees appreciate, is that they want the same things that I want. It's time to play in the mountains, time with their family, time just to read, whatever your downtime pleasure is. You need the flexibility to be able to do that, and that might mean a weekend off, that might mean coming in early, whatever that is. It can be as simple as adjusting an hour, a start time hour, and if that's something that you're able to provide, that you should.
And then getting a little more specific to you here, you are someone who owns these two businesses and you live on site at the bed and breakfast. You wake up every morning and cook for people. The summers are full on. Like, you must experience some form of burnout. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of leaders experience, or a feeling a lot of people experience. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably not great at that, at dealing with it. And it's something I'm learning and growing to, and understanding on how to manage. Taking the time, taking the break, finding what matters to you most. To me, it's getting out and exercising, whether that's a bike, a run, a hike, a walk, swimming at our aquatic center. That those things need to happen, and to make them happen first, so you've gotten them done. And it's interesting because my staff supports me very well with that. They like when I leave too. They're very encouraging. Go for a run, go for a hike, and go swim. We'll get back with you when you're back. As you really have to prioritize what makes you feel good to perform your best. So take those breaks.
Right.
The work will always be there.
Yeah. And I think being a big part of that is being an example. If you're the leader, like showing that example of taking time off work and prioritizing your mental health or your physical health and going for that run, or taking that Friday off or whatever. Because if you're not doing that, then it kind of sets the tone for your employees. Like, I don't know if I can do that. They never do it. So like showing that it's okay to do this.
Yep.
I think it's important. So switching gears here, you are a Leadership Wyoming graduate of the class of 2020.
Yes.
And Mandy told me a funny story yesterday that at the beginning of the year, you asked her and Linda if you could bring baked goods to every session to give to all of your classmates. And they said that had never been done before. Nobody's ever done that before. And I just thought that was a sweet story.
Yeah.
Telling of who you are.
And I think that was a unique piece for me that was identified during Leadership Wyoming, was embracing that I am known as a baker and a cook, and accepting that is a wonderful title to have. You're not just the cook, and you just brought the cookies. That's a really critical part of people's memories, is what they've consumed and how it made them feel. And for myself to claim as a career that I cooked, for some reason that's never been something I've been able to just embrace. I say, I cook and clean. Well, Leadership Wyoming showed me that is a great title to have, and people want you back because you are bringing the cookies, and that was a great lesson for me. So I'm proud to be that piece of
cool.
The 2020 class, and then all the groups that come through that I can give a piece of cake to on their kickoff.
And I also heard that you, for the class of 2020, helped facilitate a float down the river at the graduation. So I'd love to hear more about that. And how that happened.
2020 everything was on the table because everything was off the table since we were in the middle of a pandemic and we did not know what was happening on any given day. I remember Linda and Mandy constantly rescheduling us. It was like, the Lander session will be next week. It'll be next week. It'll be in 3 weeks. It'll be in 6 weeks. We don't know when it's happening. And lots of Zoom sessions. And somewhere in that, in one of the Zoom sessions, we threw out the idea of coming to Pinedale. And I'm pretty sure it was one of my classmates said, well, we can just stay at the Rivera. I was like, well, great, come on down. Let's do it, and let's float the creek. And that was an amazing memory of Mandy being in a unicorn suit, Rosie was ahead of me in her inner tube, and we floated right out the back here down to Harmony Bridge, where some of the board members were there waving us through the bridge, and it was the best graduation ever.
That is so special. And was the whole class here? Most of them?
A good portion. People who could make it. We kept our social distancing, did all of the appropriate things at that time. And yeah, as many people who could make it did. And hopefully we'll have more of those.
That's so great. Were there any tragedies in the river? Anyone capsized on their small tube?
Well, fortunately, the river's only about like 3 feet. Good. So if there was a capsize, I don't think the tragedy could have been air loss in the unicorn suit. I think that was maybe the bigger issue, and concerns about taking on water in that suit.
Oh my gosh.
But fortunately, everyone made it down, and we're all here to tell the story.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, and then my final question for you, Emi, is since we're here in Pinedale, which is a community that is obviously very special to you, up until a few years ago, Leadership Wyoming didn't come to Pinedale for any of their sessions. They just had a session in Jackson, and that was it. And then I think a few years ago, the cost of meeting spaces and hotels sort of became a barrier in Jackson, and you were very adamant that we should come to Pinedale instead. And so you were a big part of basically building this itinerary that we now have for the retreat session that stays in Pinedale. And we have gone over to Jackson now. Today we're going to be in Jackson, but we are primarily in Pinedale. And so I just want to hear like what about this community is so special and unique to you.
Well, Pinedale is my home. It's my heart. It's an amazing community. And I know there's other wonderful communities in Wyoming as well. But to kick off a session here where it's a little bit quieter, access to the outdoor rec and so many of the things that people love to do in Wyoming, whether it's hiking, hunting, biking, boating, fishing, or even just enjoying the scenery and birding, are right here and so easily accessible. When I think Mandy and Linda emailed me, and for some reason, I'm never looking at my email, but I happened to see the email come through, and I typed, I think it was like 3,000 words a second to get a 10-page email back to them of, you have to come to Pinedale. This is the place to do it, and here is why. And the why was there's so many pieces of the history of Pinedale that are important to the history of Wyoming. The oil and gas development here, our boom bust cycle, the tourism, agriculture, and then the rapid growth that we're experiencing now. And we are a small community, but we do represent Wyoming well. And I'm so glad that we've been able to host you for the last few years. And I hope it continues, though I understand, like I said, there's other amazing communities here that would do a great job. But this is a wonderful place to start.
Well, I think we all feel lucky to be here. And it's always such a fun, like Pinedale and Jackson are just such fun, beautiful communities to kick off the class every year. So thanks for making that happen and being a part of that. And thank you so much for being here with us today. And we will be back soon with more Leading Wyoming podcast episodes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
The Leading Wyoming podcast is made possible thanks to the generous support of our all-in sponsors,